A police cruiser screeches to a halt outside a multi-million-dollar estate. An aggressive officer slaps handcuffs on a black mother, ignoring the terrified cries of her 7-year-old son. He's convinced she's a criminal trespassing in an affluent neighborhood. He mocks her, confident he's protecting the elite residents, completely oblivious to one catastrophic detail that is about to end his entire career. She isn't just the homeowner. She is the newly elected district attorney, and she is about to make him her first prosecution. The afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the impeccably manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Estates. It was the kind of neighborhood where the silence was expensive, broken only by the hum of luxury electric vehicles or the gentle splashing of imported Italian marble fountains. The streets were lined with ancient, sprawling oak trees that formed a picturesque canopy, their autumn leaves drifting down like flakes of copper. Here, wealth wasn't just displayed, it was insulated. It was a fortress of wrought-iron gates, private security patrols, and unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. Naomi Caldwell stood on the sprawling front porch of a magnificent Georgian-style brick mansion, taking a deep breath of the crisp October air. At 36, she had spent the last decade fighting her way through the grueling, cutthroat trenches of the city's legal system. She had started as an exhausted public defender, burdened by impossible caseloads before clawing her way up to the prosecutor's office, and ultimately shocking the political establishment by winning the election for district attorney just 2 weeks prior. The victory had been a brutal, mud-slinging campaign, but she had emerged victorious, riding a wave of reform and relentless accountability. This house, this massive, beautiful home at 402 Foxglove Lane, was the culmination of those years of sacrifice. It was meant to be a sanctuary for her and her 7-year-old son, Leo. "Look, Mum, a swallowtail!" Leo's high-pitched, joyous voice rang out across the expansive front lawn. Naomi smiled, leaning against the grand white pillars of her new home. Leo was a bright, curious child, currently armed with a plastic magnifying glass and a boundless fascination for entomology. He was wearing his favorite denim overalls, his knees already stained with the fresh green grass of their new yard, as he chased a large, yellow and black butterfly toward the edge of the property line. "Don't go past the sidewalk, sweetie," Naomi called out, her voice warm but firm. She was dressed casually, a faded Yale Law sweatshirt, comfortable black leggings, and a pair of worn-out running shoes. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, secured with a simple scrunchie. After spending the entire morning directing movers, unpacking heavy boxes, and scrubbing cabinets, she looked exactly like what she was: a tired mother on moving day. The moving truck had departed over an hour ago, leaving behind a towering fortress of cardboard boxes inside the foyer. Naomi had stepped outside just to feel the sun on her face and watch her son enjoy the space they could finally call their own. They didn't have a yard in their cramped downtown apartment. This was paradise. But in Oak Ridge Estates, paradise was heavily surveilled. Directly across the street, behind the drawn Venetian blinds of a pristine stucco colonial, Brenda Carmichael was watching. Brenda was a woman who treated the Neighborhood Homeowners Association less like a community board and more like a tactical military command. For the past 20 minutes, Brenda had been nursing a lukewarm cup of Earl Grey tea, her eyes narrowed into tight slits as she monitored the black woman and child lingering on the porch of the Miller estate. To Brenda's knowledge, the Millers, a retired banking executive and his wife, had moved out to Florida a month ago. The house had been sold in a private off-market deal. Brenda hadn't been informed of the new buyers, which was a personal affront to her. And looking through her living room window, her mind, conditioned by years of prejudice and insulated paranoia, began connecting dots that didn't exist. She looks disheveled, Brenda thought, her finger hovering over the keypad of her smartphone. Why is she just standing there? The moving truck left. If she's the cleaning lady, she should be inside. And why on earth did she bring her child to work? He's trampling the hydrangeas. Brenda's heart rate quickened with self-righteous indignation. This neighborhood was safe, and she intended to keep it that way. In her mind, a strange, casually dressed woman loitering outside a vacant multi-million-dollar property was a blatant red flag. Perhaps she was a squatter. The news was always talking about squatters these days. Or maybe she was casing the place, waiting for a crew to arrive and strip the copper wiring. Without a second thought, Brenda tapped the screen of her phone, dialing the local precinct. She didn't call the non-emergency line. She dialed 911. 911, what is the location of your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the receiver. Yes, I need officers at 402 Foxglove Lane in Oak Ridge Estates immediately, Brenda whispered urgently, her eyes glued to the window. There is a suspicious individual trespassing on a vacant property. A woman. She's casing the house, prowling around the front porch. Is she armed, ma'am? Can you describe her? I don't see a weapon, but she has a child with her. Probably a cover to look less suspicious. She's African-American, wearing a baggy grey sweatshirt. Please hurry. I don't know what she's planning to do. The homeowners moved out weeks ago. Units are on the way, ma'am. Stay inside. Across the street, completely unaware of the invisible machinery of racial profiling grinding into motion against her, Naomi took a deep breath, savoring the peace. She watched Leo inspect a dandelion, oblivious to the fact that her hard-earned sanctuary was about to become a battleground. The peace was shattered by the aggressive roar of a V8 engine. A black-and-white police SUV rounded the corner of Foxglove Lane at a speed wholly inappropriate for a residential street. It screeched to a halt right in front of Naomi's driveway, the tires biting harshly into the asphalt. The sudden violent noise caused Leo to jump, dropping his magnifying glass in the grass. He immediately ran toward the porch, hiding behind Naomi's legs, his small hands gripping the fabric of her leggings. "It's okay, Leo," Naomi murmured instinctively, placing a protective hand on his head. But her sharp eyes narrowed as she watched the heavy doors of the cruiser swing open. Officer Mitchell Brady stepped out of the driver's side. He was a large man, built like a linebacker, with a flushed neck, closely cropped hair, and an air of unmistakable arrogance. He had been on the force for 15 years, a veteran who operated on gut feelings and possessed a deeply entrenched belief that his badge granted him unquestionable authority. He adjusted his heavy-duty belt, letting his hand rest casually but intentionally on the butt of his sidearm. From the passenger side emerged Officer Thomas Hales. Hales was barely 23, fresh out of the academy, his uniform still stiff, and his face betraying a nervous, eager-to-please energy. He followed a few paces behind Brady, functioning more as a shadow than an equal partner. "Stay here on the steps, Leo. Don't move," Naomi instructed in a low, calm voice. The maternal warmth in her eyes instantly shifted, replaced by the cold, analytical gaze of a veteran trial lawyer. Brady marched up the winding stone pathway, not bothering to introduce himself or offer a greeting. He stopped at the base of the porch steps, physically looming over the space, attempting to dominate the interaction before a single word was spoken. "Afternoon," Brady barked, the word devoid of any actual greeting. It was a challenge. "What exactly is your business here?" Naomi looked down at him from the porch, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile to disarm him. She simply stood her ground. "I'm sorry, officer." "Brady," he snapped, pointing a thick finger at his badge. "And this is a private neighborhood. We got a call about a trespasser casing the property. This house is vacant, so I'm going to ask you again, nicely. What are you doing here, and how did you get on the grounds?" Naomi's mind processed the variables in a fraction of a second. A call, a trespasser, vacant property. She glanced briefly across the street and noticed the subtle movement of Brenda's blinds closing. The picture became crystal clear. As the newly elected district attorney, Naomi was the chief law enforcement officer of the entire county. She commanded a massive budget, oversaw hundreds of prosecutors, and worked directly with the police chief. She knew the law intimately, not just the statutes, but the constitutional thresholds required for police engagement. She also knew exactly what was happening here. She was a black woman in a hoodie in a wealthy neighborhood, and this officer had already decided she was guilty of existing in the wrong zip code. Naomi could have ended it right then. She could have stated her name and her title. She could have watched Brady's arrogant face melt into a puddle of terror. But Naomi Caldwell had built her career on rooting out systemic rot. She wanted to see exactly how Officer Brady treated everyday citizens when he thought nobody of importance was watching. "I have business at this property," Naomi answered evenly, her voice devoid of any intimidation. "I am perfectly within my rights to be standing on this porch." Brady's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to defiance, especially not from someone he had already mentally categorized as a subordinate. "Is that right? You, the cleaning crew? Because the owners moved out, and I highly doubt they authorized a maid to bring her kid to work and let him tear up the front yard." The racist assumption hung heavy in the crisp autumn air. Behind Naomi, Leo whimpered slightly. "I am not the cleaning crew," Naomi replied, her tone dropping in temperature. "And my son is not tearing up the yard." He was looking at a butterfly. Officer Hales shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Mum, if you could just explain." "I don't need her explanations, Hales," Brady interrupted, taking a heavy step up onto the first stair of the porch, invading Naomi's personal space. "I need some ID. Right now, hand over your driver's license, state your full name, and I'll decide if you're taking a ride downtown." Naomi crossed her arms. "Officer Brady, are you detaining me, or is this a consensual encounter?" The legal terminology caused Brady to pause for a microsecond, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play lawyer with me. You're a suspect in a trespassing investigation. Give me your ID." "Under Terry v. Ohio," Naomi stated smoothly, her voice ringing with the clarity of a courtroom opening statement, "you are required to have reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed in order to detain me and demand identification. A neighbor's baseless phone call does not automatically grant you reasonable suspicion, especially when I am simply standing on a porch in broad daylight." Brady's face flushed a deep, angry crimson. The vein in his thick neck bulged. He despised citizens who thought they knew the law. He hated it even more when they were right. But his ego wouldn't allow him to back down. "You think you're smart?" Brady sneered, taking another step up. He was now only a few feet away from her. "You think watching an episode of Law and Order means you can run your mouth to a badge? I have a report of a felony burglary in progress. That gives me all the reasonable suspicion I need. Now you can give me your ID, or I can put you in handcuffs and we can sort this out at the station while Child Services comes to pick up the kid." Leo gasped, wrapping his arms tightly around his mother's leg. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice trembling. A fierce, protective fire ignited in Naomi's chest, but she locked it down behind an exterior of absolute ice. Threatening a mother with Child Protective Services as a compliance tactic was a despicable, all too common abuse of power. Officer Brady was digging his own grave, and Naomi was going to hand him the shovel. "I will not provide my identification without a lawful basis," Naomi said, her voice echoing off the brick facade of the house. "I am on my own property. You are trespassing. I suggest you return to your vehicle." "That's it, turn around." Brady lunged forward, grabbing Naomi's left arm with a harsh, violent yank. The sudden movement sent Leo stumbling backward, crying out in sheer terror as he fell onto the porch floorboards. "Leo, stay back! Do not move!" Naomi commanded, refusing to fight Brady's physical grip. She knew the mechanics of police brutality all too well. Any physical resistance, even a flinch, would be documented as resisting arrest or assaulting an officer. She let her body go completely limp, offering zero resistance, forcing Brady to aggressively manhandle a passive woman. "Put your hands behind your back," Brady barked, spinning her around and shoving her face first against one of the grand white pillars of the porch. The rough wood scraped against her cheek, but Naomi kept her eyes open, staring blankly at the perfectly painted trim. Click, zip, click. The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs locked around her wrists. Brady wrenched them upward slightly, a standard pain compliance technique designed to establish dominance. Naomi winced, but bit the inside of her cheek to keep from making a sound. "Mommy, let her go! Let my mommy go!" Leo screamed, tears streaming down his face as he scrambled to his feet. Officer Hales stepped forward, raising his hands awkwardly. "Hey, buddy, whoa, stay back," Hales stammered, clearly distressed by the crying child. Hales looked at his senior partner, panic flashing in his young eyes. Brady, are we sure about this? She's not fighting us. Maybe we should run the address first." "Shut up, Hales," Brady spat, pulling Naomi away from the pillar and marching her down the stairs towards the cruiser. She refused a lawful order. She refused to ID. She's obstructing a criminal investigation. Open the back door. But the kid is fine. We'll call a social worker once she's in the cage. By now, the commotion had drawn an audience. The insulated silence of Oak Ridge Estates was broken. Across the street, Brenda Carmichael had actually stepped out onto her manicured lawn, a smug, vindicated smile plastered across her face, her arms crossed in satisfaction. 2 doors down, an older couple walking a golden retriever stopped on the sidewalk, watching the spectacle with wide eyes. A landscaping crew working on a nearby property paused their trimmers, staring at the scene unfolding. Naomi felt the humiliation burn in her chest. She was a public figure. She was the chief prosecutor of this county. And she was being paraded in handcuffs through her own front yard like a violent criminal in full view of her new neighbors. But beneath the humiliation was a cold, calculating fury. "You wanted to know the culture of this department," Naomi thought to herself, as Brady shoved her towards the side of the squad car. "Well, here it is." "Officer Hales," Naomi said, her voice unnervingly calm and authoritative, despite her current position. She ignored Brady entirely and locked eyes with the young rookie. Hales swallowed hard, intimidated by her intense gaze. "Yes, ma'am." "I suggest you go to your vehicle's mobile data terminal right now," Naomi said, articulating every syllable with lethal precision. "I want you to pull up the property records for 402 Foxglove Lane. Look at the deed transfer that was finalized last Thursday. Then, I want you to run the name listed on that deed through the county database." Brady slammed his hand against the roof of the cruiser, laughing a harsh, ugly sound. "Listen to her. Still trying to play the boss. You think I care what name is on the deed? You broke into a house, and now you're going to jail." "Brady," Hales said nervously, taking a step toward the driver's side door. She sounds really sure. It takes 2 seconds to run the address." "Do whatever you want, Hales, but I'm putting her in the back," Brady grunted, grabbing Naomi's shoulder to push her down into the back seat. "Wait." Naomi planted her feet firmly, refusing to bend at the waist. She turned her head, looking directly into Brady's eyes. The sheer force of her confidence made the veteran cop hesitate for a fraction of a second. "Officer Brady, you are currently committing false arrest, false imprisonment, battery, and a gross violation of my civil rights under Section 9983. You have assaulted me in front of my child. I am giving you one final chance to remove these cuffs before your career is permanently dismantled." Brady sneered, leaning in close so she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You don't dismantle anything, lady. I have the badge. I make the rules. You're just another criminal who thinks she's special." "Run the address, Hales," Naomi suddenly commanded, her voice booming with the exact tone she used to command a courtroom, a voice accustomed to obedience. Hales jumped, startled by the sheer authority in her tone. He scrambled into the driver's seat, his fingers flying across the glowing keyboard mounted to the dashboard. Brady scoffed, shoving Naomi against the side of the car again. "You're making it worse for yourself? Resisting arrest, disturbing the peace. I can stack charges all day long." Inside the cruiser, the screen illuminated Hales's pale face. He pulled up the county property tax records, typing in 402 Foxglove Lane. The system buffered for an agonizing second before displaying the result. Owner of record, Caldwell, Naomi T. Hales blinked. His mouth suddenly went dry. He recognized that name. Everyone in the police department recognized that name. For the last 6 months, the police union had been aggressively campaigning against that name, terrified of her strict anti-corruption platform. She had just won the election by a landslide. "It can't be," Hales thought, his heart hammering in his chest like a trapped bird. There are a million Naomi Caldwells. Desperately, Hales copied the name and ran it through the county's internal law enforcement database, bringing up the official state identification photo. The image loaded on the screen. It was a professional headshot. The woman in the photo had perfectly styled hair and a sharp business suit, completely different from the messy bun and faded sweatshirt the woman outside was wearing. But the facial structure, the piercing, intelligent eyes, the distinct jawline. It was an exact match. Below the photo, highlighted in bold, red, government-issued text, was her official title: Status District Attorney, Electee, Fulton County. Hales felt all the blood drain from his head. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He looked through the windshield. Outside, his training officer was shoving the newly elected district attorney of Fulton County against the squad car, screaming in her face, while her 7-year-old son cried on the porch of the mansion she legally owned. "Oh my God," Hales whispered, the words barely escaping his throat. "Oh my God." He fumbled with the door handle, practically falling out of the cruiser. He stumbled around the hood of the car, waving his hands frantically, his face completely pale. Brady, stop! Get your hands off her!" Hales shouted, his voice cracking with sheer panic. Brady looked at his rookie, annoyed. "What's wrong with you, Hales? Open the damn back door." "No, Brady, you don't understand!" Hales practically screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Naomi, who was standing perfectly straight, a cold, dangerous smirk now playing at the corner of her lips. Hales swallowed hard, feeling like he was about to vomit. "Brady, that's Naomi Caldwell." Brady frowned, his thick brow furrowing in confusion. "Who?" "Naomi Caldwell," Hales repeated, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. He looked at Naomi with wide, apologetic eyes before looking back at his partner. She's the new district attorney. This is her house." "You just handcuffed the district attorney." The world seemed to stop spinning. The autumn wind died down. The birds stopped chirping. The silence that descended upon the scene was so absolute, so heavy, it felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of Oak Ridge Estates. Brady froze. His hand, still gripping Naomi's arm, suddenly felt like it was wrapped around a live grenade. He slowly turned his head, looking back at the woman he had just violently detained. Naomi Caldwell stood tall, her hands bound behind her back, the Yale sweatshirt ruffled, a red scrape forming on her cheek. But she didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like an executioner. "Officer Brady?" Naomi said softly, her voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel. "You have exactly 3 seconds to take these handcuffs off me, or the very first thing I do when I take my oath of office on Monday morning is convene a grand jury specifically for you." For a moment, the only sound on Foxglove Lane was the wind rustling through the ancient oak branches. Officer Mitchell Brady stood completely paralyzed. The arrogant sneer that had permanently etched itself into his features just moments before had vanished, replaced by the slack-jawed, hollow expression of a man who had just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. His brain stubbornly refused to process the information. District Attorney, the chief law enforcement officer of the county, the woman whose signature would authorize or decline every single criminal charge his department brought forward, the woman who had campaigned specifically on prosecuting dirty cops. "Brady!" Hales hissed, his voice frantic. "The keys! Get the cuffs off her!" Brady fumbled at his duty belt, his hand suddenly shaking so violently he could barely grip his own keyring. The metallic clinking sounded deafening in the heavy silence. He stepped forward, his eyes darting anywhere but Naomi's face. He reached behind her back, struggling to insert the small key into the lock. "Mom!" Brady stammered, his voice stripped of all its previous bass and authority. It sounded thin, reedy, almost pathetic. There was a misunderstanding. We received a high-priority dispatch, a 911 call from a concerned neighbor about a potential felony in progress. I was just following standard operational procedure. Click, zip, the cuffs fell away. Naomi immediately brought her arms forward, rubbing her reddened wrists. But her eyes never left Brady. "Standard operational procedure?" Naomi echoed, her voice terrifyingly quiet. "Is it standard procedure to escalate to physical violence against a non-threatening, unarmed citizen who asks for your legal justification? Is it standard procedure to threaten to have a child thrown into state custody to force compliance?" Naomi didn't wait for his answer. She turned her back on him completely, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than an insect, and rushed up the porch steps. "Leo!" she gasped, dropping to her knees on the hard wooden floorboards. The fierce, icy prosecutor vanished in an instant, replaced entirely by a terrified, fiercely loving mother. She pulled her son into a tight, desperate embrace. Leo buried his face in her neck, his small body trembling violently. "Mommy, he hurt you. The bad policeman hurt you." "I know, baby. I know," Naomi whispered, kissing the top of his head, her own eyes finally burning with unshed tears of rage. "But I'm okay. We are safe. He is never, ever going to hurt us again. I promise you." She held him for a long moment, letting the rhythm of her heartbeat calm him down. When she finally stood up, holding Leo's hand securely in hers, her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated resolve. She walked back down the steps, stopping inches from where Brady was standing awkwardly by his cruiser, looking like a man awaiting the guillotine. "Mom, if you had just identified yourself." Brady tried again, the desperate instinct for self-preservation kicking in. "If I had to identify myself as the district attorney just to survive an encounter with you on my own front lawn," Naomi cut him off, her voice cracking like a whip. "Then what hope does a teenager in a hoodie have? What hope does a single mother coming home from a night shift have? You don't respect the law, Officer Brady. You respect power. And right now, you are terrified because you just realized I have more of it than you do." "Now see here, officers!" A shrill, breathless voice interrupted. Naomi turned her head. Marching across the meticulously paved street was Brenda Carmichael. She was clutching a cashmere cardigan around her shoulders, a look of triumphant vindication plastered across her heavily powdered face. She had seen the handcuffs go on from her window and had hurried over to claim her social credit for saving the neighborhood. "I am the one who called dispatch," Brenda announced proudly, stopping a few feet away, entirely oblivious to the thick, suffocating tension radiating from the two police officers. She pointed an accusatory finger at Naomi. "Thank goodness you arrived so quickly. I knew she was up to no good. Did you find lockpicks on her? You should check that oversized sweatshirt. She could be hiding stolen fixtures." Hales closed his eyes, physically wincing. Brady looked at Brenda with a mixture of sheer panic and intense hatred. "Mom, please step back to your residence." "Step back? I am the president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association." Brenda bristled, offended. "I demand to know what this criminal is doing on the Miller property. And why did you take the handcuffs off?" Naomi slowly turned to face her new neighbor. The devastating calmness in her demeanor made Brenda falter for a second. "Mrs. Carmichael, I presume?" Naomi asked smoothly. Brenda blinked, taken aback. "How do you know my name?" "Because when I purchased this house for $2.4 million last week, I made it a point to read the HOA bylaws and note the board members," Naomi said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward the woman. "My name is Naomi Caldwell. I am the new owner of 402 Foxglove Lane. I am also the district attorney of Fulton County." Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Naomi, then at the massive house, then at the two silent, sweating police officers. "You racially profiled me," Naomi continued, her voice echoing down the pristine, quiet street for all the lingering neighbors to hear. "You weaponized the police department against me and my 7-year-old son because my skin color and my clothes didn't match your deeply flawed perception of wealth. You filed a false police report claiming a felony burglary was in progress when you simply saw a mother and child looking at a butterfly." I didn't," Brenda stammered, her face draining of color, the cashmere cardigan suddenly looking like a cheap rag draped over her shrinking shoulders. "I thought the house was vacant. I was protecting. You are guilty of misusing the 911 emergency system, a Class B misdemeanor in this state," Naomi stated, delivering the legal facts with crushing weight. "I highly suggest you return to your home, Mrs. Carmichael, and contact a defense attorney, because I assure you, a summons will be mailed to you by Monday." Brenda let out a small, terrified squeak, turned on her heel, and practically sprinted back across the street, locking her front door loudly behind her. Naomi turned her attention back to the officers. She reached into the pocket of her leggings and pulled out her smartphone. Who are you calling?" Brady asked, his voice trembling. The reality of his ruined pension, his lost career, and potential prison time was finally crushing his chest. "I am calling your boss," Naomi said, dialing a number she had saved just days ago during her transition briefings. The phone rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Chief Harrison." "Chief," Naomi said, her tone professional but laced with steel. "This is Naomi Caldwell. I need you at 402 Foxglove Lane immediately." There was a pause on the line. "Naomi, what's going on? That's out in Oak Ridge. Did something happen at your new place?" "Yes, Chief. One of your officers, a Mitchell Brady, just unlawfully detained me, assaulted me, and placed me in handcuffs on my own property in front of my child without a shred of reasonable suspicion, based on a racially motivated nuisance call." A heavy, stunned silence filled the receiver. When Chief Harrison finally spoke, his voice was tight with suppressed fury. "I'm on my way. Do not let him leave." The line went dead. Naomi lowered the phone and looked at Brady. "The chief is en route." Brady's legs gave out. He stumbled backward, leaning heavily against the side of his cruiser to keep from falling. He looked at Hales, silently pleading for help, but the young rookie had taken several steps back, distancing himself entirely from his training officer. "Miss Caldwell, please," Brady begged, his pride entirely broken. It was a pathetic sight, a man who had bullied his way through life suddenly begging for mercy the second he encountered someone stronger. "I have a family. I have 15 years on the force. If you push this, the Union will fight back, but my life will be ruined. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Let me apologize to your boy. Let me make this right." Naomi's expression hardened into granite. "Do not speak about my son." She took a step closer to Brady, lowering her voice so only he and Hales could hear. "You think this is just about today, Officer Brady?" Naomi asked softly. "You think I don't know who you are?" Brady looked up, confusion mixing with his terror. "During my transition briefings last week, I requested the internal affairs files for the 20 most problematic officers in your precinct," Naomi revealed, dropping the absolute bombshell. "Your name was number 4 on that list. I read the file on the Marcus Johnson arrest 2 years ago, where you fractured a teenager's orbital bone because he resisted. I read the file on the traffic stop last spring, where you pulled your service weapon on an unarmed driver over a busted taillight." Brady's breath hitched. Those files had been buried by the Union. They were supposed to be sealed. The previous DA looked the other way, because he needed the police union's endorsement, Naomi continued, her voice utterly merciless. "But I don't. I won without them. And when I read your file, I flagged it for immediate review the second I took office. I just never imagined you would be foolish enough to deliver yourself to my front doorstep before my term even officially began." Brady closed his eyes, a single bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. He was completely cornered. The trap hadn't just sprung. It had been waiting for him. "You aren't just going to lose your badge for today, Brady," Naomi promised, the weight of her office bearing down on him like an anvil. "I am opening a full grand jury investigation into your entire career. Every arrest you've made, every use of force report you've filed. If you broke the law, and we both know you did, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of it." She then turned her gaze to Officer Hales. The rookie flinched, bracing for impact. "Officer Hales," Naomi said, her tone slightly softer, but still demanding accountability. "Yes, ma'am." Hales swallowed, standing at rigid attention. "You knew he was out of line," Naomi said. "You tried to stop him. You ran the address. For that, you will keep your job today. But let this be a lesson that defines the rest of your career. Complicity is just as dangerous as malice. If you ever let a badge protect a bully again, I will come for you too. Am I understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear." Hales nodded furiously, relief and shame washing over him in equal measure. In the distance, the wail of police sirens began to echo through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge Estates. But this time, they weren't coming for the black mother in the faded sweatshirt. They were coming for the man who thought the law didn't apply to him. Naomi turned away from the officers and walked back up the steps to her son. She picked up the plastic magnifying glass from the grass and handed it to him, offering a reassuring, warm smile that completely erased the fierce prosecutor. "Come on, Leo," she said gently, leading him toward the massive oak front doors of their new home. "Let's go inside. We have a lot of unpacking to do." The wail of the sirens grew deafening, echoing off the manicured facades of Oak Ridge Estates. Within 3 minutes, 3 unmarked black SUVs and 2 marked patrol cruisers swarmed Foxglove Lane, their flashing red and blue lights painting the pristine neighborhood in chaotic, strobing colors. For a community that prided itself on invisibility and quiet wealth, this was the ultimate spectacle. Neighbors who had previously retreated indoors now stood boldly on their perfectly edged lawns, whispering furiously, their cell phones recording every second. Chief of Police David Harrison was the first to step out of the lead SUV, a towering, broad-shouldered man with iron-grey hair and a deeply lined face, Harrison had spent 35 years on the force. He was an old-school cop, but unlike Mitchell Brady, Harrison understood that the badge was a contract with the public, not a license to terrorize. He slammed his car door with a force that made Officer Hales visibly jump. Close behind the chief were two stern-faced men in sharp, dark suits, detectives from the Internal Affairs Division. Chief Harrison bypassed Brady entirely and marched straight up the winding stone pathway to the grand front doors of 402 Foxglove Lane. He rang the bell. A moment later, Naomi opened the door. She had taken off the faded Yale sweatshirt, revealing a crisp white blouse underneath. Her demeanor was no longer that of a defensive mother on her porch. She was entirely in her element, exuding the unquestionable authority of Fulton County's top prosecutor. "Miss Caldwell," Chief Harrison said, removing his service cap. His voice was heavy with a mixture of profound embarrassment and simmering anger. "Are you and your son unharmed?" "Physically, yes, Chief Harrison," Naomi replied evenly, stepping out onto the porch but keeping the door slightly ajar so Leo wouldn't be exposed to the flashing lights. "But I cannot say the same for my constitutional rights, nor the integrity of your department." Harrison nodded grimly. He turned around, his eyes locking onto Brady, who was leaning against his cruiser, sweating profusely despite the crisp autumn air. The chief marched down the steps, the two Internal Affairs detectives flanking him, like wolves cornering wounded prey. "Brady!" Harrison growled, his voice low enough to avoid a public screaming match, but sharp enough to cut bone. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't have you placed in the back of your own vehicle right now." "Chief, it was a bad call," Brady stammered, his hands trembling as he gestured vaguely toward the house across the street. Dispatch relayed a priority 1911 call from Brenda Carmichael. She's the HOA president. She reported a felony burglary in progress. I arrived on the scene, identified a suspect matching the description, and attempted to conduct a standard investigatory stop. She was non-compliant, Chief. She refused to ID herself, so I escalated to physical detainment to secure the scene. Harrison's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. He looked at young Officer Hales, who was standing at rigid attention, pale as a ghost. "Officer Hales," the chief barked. "Is that the truth? Did this woman pose a threat? Was there reasonable, articulable suspicion of a felony?" Brady shot Hales a venomous, desperate glare, a silent command to fall in line and protect the Brotherhood. For a second, Hales hesitated. The blue wall of silence was drilled into recruits from day one at the academy. But then, Hales looked at Naomi Caldwell standing on the porch. He remembered the unyielding power in her voice, and he remembered the terrifying realization that he had almost ruined his life for a bully. "No, sir," Hales said loudly, his voice cracking slightly before finding its footing. There was no threat. The subject was standing on her porch with her 7-year-old child, observing an insect. Officer Brady bypassed all de-escalation protocols. He demanded identification without articulating suspicion, and when she correctly cited case law, he became enraged. He grabbed her violently, shoved her against the pillar, and cuffed her. He also threatened to have her child taken by state services. Brady's face twisted in rage. "You rat, you little coward, I was training you." "Shut your mouth!" Harrison roared, stepping so close to Brady that the brash officer had to lean back against the car window. The chief's face was inches from Brady's. "You stupid, arrogant fool. You just assaulted the district attorney of Fulton County on her own property. You dragged my department's reputation through the mud because you couldn't stand a black woman telling you no." Brady swallowed hard, his bravado entirely stripped away. "Chief, please, the Union can't save you from a felony civil rights violation," Harrison hissed. He took a step back and extended his hand. "Badge and gun, now." The words hung in the air, absolute and irrevocable. In the world of law enforcement, being stripped of your badge and weapon on the street, in full view of the public and your peers, was the ultimate disgrace. "Chief, you can't do this here," Brady pleaded, tears of humiliation finally welling in his eyes. "Not in front of everybody." "You had no problem humiliating her in front of everybody," Harrison replied coldly. "Badge and gun. If I have to ask a third time, I'm ordering internal affairs to arrest you for battery under color of law." With shaking, clumsy fingers, Brady unclipped his gold shield from his uniform shirt and handed it over. He then slowly drew his service weapon, popped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed the heavy firearm to one of the IA detectives. "You are suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full criminal investigation," Harrison declared. "Detective Miller will drive you home. You are not to speak to the press. You are not to contact Officer Hales. And if you so much as drive within a 5-mile radius of Oak Ridge Estates, I will personally lock you in a holding cell. Get out of my sight." As the disgraced officer was shoved into the back of an unmarked SUV, the flashing lights illuminated the drawn curtains of Brenda Carmichael's home. She thought she had escaped the fallout by running inside. She was violently wrong. Later that evening, at precisely 7:15 p.m., a marked squad car pulled into Brenda's driveway. Detective Sarah Jenkins knocked on the heavy wooden door. When a terrified, trembling Brenda opened it, Jenkins didn't smile. "Brenda Carmichael?" Jenkins asked, holding a yellow slip of paper. "Yes," Brenda whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the patrol car. "I have a court summons for you," Jenkins said, handing over the document. "You are being formally charged with misuse of the 911 emergency system and filing a false police report. Your court date is next Thursday. I suggest you don't miss it." But I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," Brenda sobbed, clutching the paper as if it were on fire. "No, ma'am," Jenkins replied sternly. "You were trying to keep the neighborhood exclusive. Have a good night." By the next morning, the story had exploded. The local news cycle was dominated by the leaked smartphone footage captured by the neighbors. The headline of the Fulton County Chronicle read, "Nuda cuffed on her own lawn. Corrupt cop meets his match." The city was in an uproar, but the sheer, poetic justice of the situation galvanized the public behind Naomi Caldwell like never before. Monday morning arrived with the crisp, undeniable energy of a new era. The Fulton County Courthouse, a massive structure of white marble and towering Corinthian columns, was buzzing with unprecedented electricity. Reporters, city council members, and community leaders packed the grand rotunda. Naomi Caldwell stood at the front of the room, dressed in a flawless, tailored charcoal grey suit, her posture impeccable. Beside her stood Leo, looking sharp in a tiny navy blazer, holding his mother's left hand. In her right hand, Naomi rested her palm on a worn family Bible. Standing before her was the Honorable Judge Arthur Pendleton, a respected, no-nonsense jurist who had seen decades of political grandstanding. But as he looked at Naomi, his eyes held a profound respect. "Do you, Naomi T. Caldwell, solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and to faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of District Attorney?" Judge Pendleton's voice echoed through the silent rotunda. "I do," Naomi answered, her voice ringing clear, steady, and unshakable. "Congratulations, Madam District Attorney." Pendleton smiled warmly, shaking her hand as the room erupted into thunderous applause. The applause was a mandate, and Naomi wasted no time executing it. Less than 2 hours after taking her oath, Naomi sat behind the massive mahogany desk in the DA's executive suite. The corner office offered a sprawling view of the city skyline, but her focus was locked on the man sitting across from her, Michael Flaherty, the president of the local police union. Flaherty was a notoriously aggressive negotiator, A man used to bullying elected officials with threats of political ruin and blue flu walkouts. He sat back in his chair, a smug, confident smile on his face, oblivious to the fact that his usual tactics were about to violently expire. "Look, Naomi," Flaherty started, using her first name in a deliberate attempt to undermine her authority. "We all agree Brady overstepped. He was a hothead. But the union is willing to let him take early retirement. He surrenders his pension, we sweep the assault charges under the rug, and the department avoids a massive public relations nightmare. It's a win-win." Naomi didn't immediately respond. She slowly opened a thick manila folder resting on her desk. It was Brady's internal affairs file, heavily annotated with her own red ink. "Mr. Flaherty," Naomi said quietly, leaning forward and steepling her fingers. "I don't think you fully grasp the reality of the situation you are currently sitting in. I am not a politician looking for your endorsement. I am the chief law enforcement officer of this county, and I do not make backroom deals with criminals, even when they wear a badge." Flaherty's smug smile vanished. "Excuse me? You're calling one of my officers a criminal?" "Mitchell Brady assaulted a citizen, falsified a police report, and violated my civil rights," Naomi stated, her tone ice-cold. "If he had done that to a teenager in the South Ward, you would have buried the complaint, and he would be back on patrol today. The only reason you are offering early retirement is because he made the fatal mistake of doing it to me. If you prosecute him, the union will make your life a living hell," Flaherty threatened, his face turning red. "We won't endorse your re-election. We'll stall investigations. You'll have a war on your hands." "I welcome it," Naomi fired back, her eyes flashing with dangerous intensity. "Because the second you try to orchestrate a slowdown, I will open a federal racketeering investigation into this union. I will subpoena your communications, your financial records, and every single grievance you've buried over the last 10 years. Flaherty froze. The threat wasn't a bluff. He could see it in her eyes. She had the legal authority, the public backing, and the ruthless intellect to completely dismantle his organization. "Here is what is going to happen, Michael," Naomi continued, finally using his first name to establish her absolute dominance. "Tomorrow morning, I am convening a special grand jury. I am presenting felony charges against Mitchell Brady for battery, false imprisonment, and official misconduct. Officer Thomas Hales has already agreed to testify for the prosecution under immunity. Mitchell Brady is going to trial, and he is going to state prison. You are going to publicly condemn his actions and distance the union from him. If you do not, I will burn your corrupt little empire to the ground." She closed the file with a sharp snap. "Are we clear?" Flaherty stared at her, his jaw tight. He looked at the closed file, then at the fearless woman sitting behind the desk. For the first time in his career, the union boss had absolutely no leverage. He swallowed hard, stood up, and nodded once. "Crystal," Flaherty muttered, turning and walking out of the office, his tail tucked firmly between his legs. The following weeks transformed the legal landscape of Fulton County. The grand jury indicted Mitchell Brady on all counts in less than 45 minutes. Without the union's financial backing or legal protection, Brady's high-priced defense attorney, William Carter, desperately tried to negotiate a plea deal. Naomi rejected every single offer. She wanted Brady convicted in open court, on the public record, as a message to every single corrupt officer in the state. Brenda Carmichael didn't fare much better. Facing a trial and immense public backlash, she pled guilty to the misdemeanor charge. She was heavily fined and sentenced to 200 hours of community service, specifically assigned to a youth center in the city's poorest district. The social ostracization was even worse. She was quietly forced to resign as the HOA president, and her pristine neighborhood suddenly treated her like a pariah. 3 months later, the first snow of winter began to fall over Oak Ridge Estates, blanketing the expansive lawns in a pristine layer of white. Naomi stood at the bay window of her living room, a mug of hot coffee warming her hands. She watched as Leo, bundled up in a thick winter coat and a bright red scarf, rolled a massive ball of snow across the front yard, attempting to build his first snowman. He was laughing, his breath pluming in the freezing air, completely carefree. A police cruiser slowly rolled down Foxglove Lane, conducting a routine neighborhood patrol. The cruiser slowed down as it approached Naomi's house. The driver, a newly transferred officer who had been thoroughly briefed on the new standards of the department, rolled down his window. He didn't scowl. He didn't demand identification. He simply smiled, waved at Leo, and gave Naomi a respectful nod before rolling his window back up and continuing on his way. Naomi smiled back, taking a sip of her coffee. The neighborhood was finally quiet, but this time it wasn't the silence of fear, exclusion, or insulated wealth. It was the peaceful, unshakable silence of justice. If this story made your blood boil and cheer for justice, you're not alone. It is a powerful reminder that arrogance and corruption will eventually cross the wrong person. Naomi didn't just fight for herself. She dismantled a broken system to protect everyone who didn't have her power. What would you have done if you were in Naomi's shoes on that porch? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends to spread the message, and subscribe for more incredible, real-life stories of justice served.